seconds for the signal to actually propagate, and then we can just jump straight into it. So let's have a look. Let's see. Dashboard. Cancel. Open a new tab. Yeah, we should be all green everywhere. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, we are. Haha, good. Usually Twitch takes its time. Okay, cool. So let me actually get this over to this side. So that I'm looking directly into the camera. Hello. Hi. Hello and welcome to another episode or another version of Proto. Proto is basically a program where we look at sort of design elements, in the crypto sphere, right? So crypto, is an interesting sort of new paradigm which allows secret making, right? And this sort of introduces an entirely kind of new vibe to the landscape of design. So far on Proto, what we've been actually looking into is one of these fundamental building blocks, right? Which is decentralized identity. And initially, when we started out thinking about decentralized identity, we thought, okay, because a bunch of us are, coming from the Cardano sort of ecosystem, and given that within the Cardano ecosystem, metadata just went on live, and so we were thinking, oh, actually, you know what, we can just do it simply, and just have a decentralized identity be established by putting on metadata onto the blockchain, and then just sort of pinging that. And then, very quickly it occurred to us that it's not really going to be as simple as that. And just the difficulty of implementing something in the right way has become even more obvious to us. And so, we've entered into this whole kind of spiral, thinking about, in a way, philosophically, but also practically, what is the nature of identity, right? And how do concepts like time and trust sort of factor into it, right? And also, sovereignty as well, right? So today we're going to be basically sort of expanding on just sort of like these debates, basically. Well, yeah, a conversation, not really a debate. On these conversations. And we're going to be joined by one of our awesome community members, who I shall bring up right now. There you are. Hello, hello.
Left, right.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. Hey Nils. So basically, as I said earlier, we're just sort of, gonna be having a bit of an informal conversation around these ideas, a bit more philosophical, I suppose, but also, we'll sort of be trying to get at it from a kind of practical level as well. So before we kind of jump right in, do you wanna just kind of give like a, a a bit of background in terms of sort of like where you're coming from like design, from a design standpoint?
Yeah, sure. For me, the journey started in '98, so it's quite a long time. I'm a senior user experience designer. I run a brand and conversational brand studio in Amsterdam, and I got in contact with Cardano in 2017. I think a lot of us did because of the run up. I did a lot of corporate stuff for automotive, Axo Nobel, a lot of product comparison websites. And the last client I did was Dirac, a Swedish audio company, awesome, who do awesome stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and all companies were like pulling back a little bit and throwing everybody out and going back to core business and core operations. So I was
Predictable.
like, in March, I was like, okay, what now? And I was not really happy with the digital space and what we were building. And 90% is like e-commerce. And I don't know, is the internet one big marketplace, or can it be something more, something better? And I had this feeling like perhaps I should come up with a new design system to make digital more human, more social. And I see a lot of companies struggle with human-centered design or user-centered design. They all say they do it, but it's the same as Agile and Scrum. They all say they do it, but they don't. A lot. I think 90% of companies still do product proposition online. It's not. It's nothing to do with user-centered design.
Yeah.
And with that knowledge, I started to design a design system, which is now called Conversational-UX-UI, which kind of brings conversations to the forefront of the interface and starts asking questions instead of normal page-based design, which is telling people what to do. And then at some point along this journey, especially through the Catalyst program, I came in contact with Quasar and James, and we met, and that's where we are now.
Cool. Okay, so it's interesting. Just to kind of expand a little bit, because you mentioned sort of like agile and stuff. Like, could you try and expand just a little bit in terms of how you're approaching the sort of the conversational UX UI UX in terms of like say comparing it, because obviously agile, that's more of like how it's more kind of in a way kind of like a KPI. It's more as you said, kind of more product oriented rather than human sort of centric design. And perhaps I suppose part of that is in that particular framework where if you have maybe the framework and the tools actually surrounding or sort of all pointing towards like the human, being human centric, that would make quite a difference. Is that kind of like how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, well, obviously, Agile Scrum are just methods to
Yeah.
work in.
Yeah.
I think those are about the how to be
Yeah.
as productive as possible.
Yeah. Yes. Well, productivity. Yeah.
It's productivity based. I think if you think about the design system, conversational UX UI, it's more about what you're building and why you building it, and what is the intent and the purpose of doing stuff.
Yeah.
And for this, I have like 4 chapters in the whole design system. We have like the conversational UI, which is like I think it's like, you can compare it to chat, but you make it actionable with making decision trees, but visually.
Yeah.
Chat bots are often text input, and those are like frustrating as crazy.
Yeah.
Voice is nice and really good, especially because I think Google has been training this stuff for like 13 years already. So, but for complex interactive stuff, it's not suitable.
Yeah.
And I think conversational UI is like in the middle, and the conversational UX component is like it's a toolkit system. I created a toolkit system in which I use activity pairs, which are just verbs and nouns in a domain specific language. If you have those selected, then you have probably a focus of an area of interest, like pain gain analysis creates opportunity. And when you have that in place, you can map experiences with those words, verbs and nouns, so you can start creating the skeleton of the experience. And after that, I have a emotion mapping exercise, which brings in negative emotions. Because if you have the negative, the skeleton, the negative emotions, you can create the actions needed to create a positive experience. And that's the basic of the toolkit. And I have some extra exercises like engagement mapping and how you can keep people on their toes. And obviously, conversations and stories have structures. So we have like structures like value, effort reward, or simple start, beginning, end, or setup, conflict, resolution. Those are simple structures, but these structures are missing in today's social platforms. They only give you setup. You can start a message, then conflict starts, but they don't give a resolution. And
Resolution to it.
that's awesome, because then they can fill their advertising engines with all kinds of stuff you are interested in. But for purposeful interaction design and human interaction design, you need to give that resolution stage. Otherwise, people people are in agony all the time, and that's essentially what they're aiming for, because they want to keep you on your toes.
Attention economy, in it, that
attention farming. And at some point down the journey of designing something, because it was not that I had the whole picture of what I was building in my brain. It's just I had like 5-6 times that I really had to pivot my thoughts, because you saw, oh, this piece goes there and this piece goes there. So it was a really fluid process. And at some point you realize that the two things that we're doing wrong or being pushed in is the dimension we choose and the perspective we choose to design stuff. And with dimension, I mean, if you build an app, you build into the ecosystem a network of Google or Apple, and therefore you create an app, and therefore you create features, because that's the logical construct of the dimensions you're working in. But I thought, like, in the crypto space, blockchain is a network. So you should be designing a network. The only way you can design a network instead of siloed dApps or apps is by designing the conversation and not the page. And that when I got my head around that, you all of a sudden, I don't know how that is with you in life, but when you are focusing on something, all of a sudden everything around you shows you clues. And I saw quotes like, the truth is in our most vulnerable conversations. And then my brain said, so why do we design in pages? You know? And all that kind of happy little accident, I don't know, started to happen.
Man, you said a whole bunch of like, I feel like there's a whole bunch of stuff that we could just like expand on in this one conversation, right?
It's a bit unfair, because I've been thinking about this stuff for a month, and I tried to push it in like 3 minutes, and it's not gonna work.
Yeah, true. But like, just before we move on to like the three subjects or points that we want to sort of expand on here, one of the things that just occurs to me from what you just said is that in having such an interaction, fundamentally identity is super important, right? Because it's a conversation, right? And in a conversation you actually need an identity of the parties who are actually interacting. So that's one thing that sort of just came to mind as being like quite pivotal to actually sort of like introducing like a rethinking of and sort of retooling the environment in which we actually build these things in. And then the other thing was, the attention economy, what, the incentive layer that crypto brings actually allows for, us to be less sort of serving of the attention economy, because actually we're not looking to serve ads, because the value creation and the money exists in the companies, kind of thing, right? So that kind of addresses an aspect in that regard. And then the third and final thing is localization, because it's interesting how you got to talking about it in language, right, in like emotion and stuff, and you're referring to like adjectives, and so on, and sort of like sentiment, and obviously with sentiment we've got the addition, or the potential addition of like looking into sentiment analysis, right, as a layer on top of that, with machine learning and all that kind of awesome new stuff that has arisen from that. But anyway, um, right now let's actually. I know, yeah, it's crazy, man. Like that's the thing, and well, actually, one quick point, which you kind of touched on, but in a different dimension. One thing that I've realized that I have gone through and a number of others have gone through because this kind of paradigm shift or the landscape is quite new. You know, you kind of start off at doing one thing and then you realize, wait, hang on, I need to actually zoom back out because the problem is much bigger and the opportunity is much bigger. I feel like because in a way, the way you started the conversational UI UX was actually quite specific. And then you decided, okay, you know what, actually, I'm going to zoom out and sort of like create an ability for like to solve, you create the ability for other people to solve as opposed to you kind of being quite specific to one particular like vertical kind of thing. I make this analogy whenever I talk about projects within Catalyst, which is you have the trunk of the tree, right, which is the consensus algorithm and the ledger as well, right? So the
Mhm.
blockchain itself, and then you have projects, which are the leaves. But then, you know, what connects the leaves to the trunk is a branch, right? And fundamentally, in a way, kind of the realization or the transition that I feel you went through and I went through and a bunch of others have is, hang on, okay, the leaf is interesting, but I need to figure out the branch so that I'm not just solving a problem for myself, but also for other people. And then in doing so, that can just really like compound and just like, you know, snowball into a much more interesting the paradigm and sort of dimension because you know then the someone can then replicate that in a different environment, right? And then you know given it's open source, we can be learning from you know whatever the hell they're doing, you know, in that particular direction. And you know they can, you know, the learning just kind of, you know, with the whole co-creation, the learning just kind of intermingles in such a lovely way.
It is for one where the roots, because it's supposed that trees are even interconnected below the soil, and there's communication going on between the trees
Like pando trees, yeah.
beneath the soil. So that's also another dimension.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, in the let's call it the legacy world, just to to differentiate the two.
Yeah.
In the legacy world, we built the same stuff in organizations for our organizations. Everybody is more or less doing the same thing, and we have all kinds of nifty frameworks to make stuff easier to build, and that can be in interface modules, but also in Vue, all kinds
React.
of
Yeah.
React Native and all that
Mm.
kind of stuff.
Mm.
But in the end, we're all trying to fix the same problems. But the way we organize ourselves, we do it in different companies. And that's perhaps also the cool thing about being a UX designer for, I don't know, too long. But I've seen so many companies inside, and I can actually tell that everybody's trying to solve the same thing.
Yeah.
And that makes crypto so interesting, but also a bit scary, because if that's a network and we all aiming for the same thing, then
Well, what happens when it's
there's
solved?
probably one problem to solve.
And then what happens when that problem is solved? We're
Yeah,
all out of work.
yeah, exactly. Because in the end, we all want to be loved, and we want to be safe, and we want to
Have a sense of
have
purpose.
some money or whatever, or
Yeah.
at least food and
Yeah.
shelter.
Yeah.
Just a Maslow pyramid, and then we go to self actualization. Okay. So
Yeah.
it's but let's go to the
Yeah. To the
to the
points.
subject, because
Yeah.
otherwise
Exactly.
we'll
We're gonna
go on tangents of tangents of tangents.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Let's bring it to the middle here. Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, so these are the points that we are hoping to actually cover today. I'll just try and fit them a little bit better. And yeah, so here we go. So these are the points. I'll just quickly read them out. So first one, sovereignty and identity as paradoxical, right? So this is a stance that Niels has had in our conversations within the community, and we're hoping to kind of expand on that, and then we'll move on to talking about social construct, whether basically like you exist because you interact, right, with others, kind of thing, as opposed to I don't know, living in the mountains, in the forest by yourself. It's like maybe the whole thing of like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it really happen? Um, and then lastly, we'll get into this phrase which is quite famous in crypto, which is code is law, or code as law. Depending on
It's not yet, but it has the
the
scary
potential
opportunity to become.
to possibly be. Exactly, yeah. So we're going to be looking at the balance of what constructs of the legacy world, would be smart to bring, into the decentralized world, and which ones, should be jettisoned, basically, because they are a kind of, I don't know, vestigious manifestation of old thinking, which was a product of limitations in our tooling or in our technology, kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, boom, boom, boom. Let's start with the first one: sovereignty and identity as paradoxical. Do you want to just share your perspective on why you think this is a case for you?
Well, first, it's why why do you need identity in the current world? Because we've created constructs like borders and invisible borders and countries, and we silo everything in life, and that's what humans do. And the best thing is we tag a price on it, and then we can sell we can sell it. But it ties a bit into what is our desired outcome for a decentralized world.
Yeah.
In blockchain, if I start interacting with the world through blockchain in some way, I exist because there is proof I interacted for the last, I don't know. If I'm on a specific location for more than 99% of the time, or 90%, then that's probably my home. If I the same with existence. If I can communicate through the blockchain with others, then there's proof that I've communicated. Why do you need identity? To get a passport, but a passport is needed to go over an imaginary border.
Visible line.
Why do you need to get a driver's license? But a driver's license, I don't know if you know the story about the driver's license, but it's like more or less a license to kill.
Wait, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, well, the original story for driver's license is to exempt humans for the, more or less, not totally, but to give them the right to operate a vehicle which has the opportunity to kill people.
I suppose, yeah.
That's in the first cars. They had like flagmen, and they walked in front of the car.
Yeah, they would walk.
And at some point they introduced the driver's license to take away the guy.
What it was? So it was like basically you saying that you accept liability.
Yeah.
Okay. From that standpoint, okay.
So what I'm trying to get at is sovereignty is like self-control, right? With everything, with your money, with your possession, with your thinking, with your doing, with whatever. So why do I need an identity to do that?
Accountability.
How did we do that 1,000 years ago?
Oh yeah, well, yeah,
You,
true. Well, okay,
you just slayed someone, right? I don't like you. Die.
true, yeah, but then obviously, we've evolved since then, and one, a case can be made that, life is a lot better now. People are living longer. Society is comparatively more safe. Um, so, perhaps, we are doing some things right, and the lawlessness of yesteryear is not entirely sort of like a model to kind of go by. But anyway,
But it could
to come
be.
back,
Isn't identity like the tag on the cow's ear? Isn't it domesticating? I don't know. I'm just
yeah,
throwing up.
no,
I'm just throwing up
yeah.
ideas.
Oh,
But
yeah. I mean, yeah. So you could think of it that way, but at the same time, you could look at that as being civil, right?
yeah, but
Being
I don't.
civil is being domesticated to some extent because you're no longer a feral person or being that just does whatever it wants without any concept of how their actions affect other people. So in that way, identity is important for public
Ah,
accountability.
but then you get at constructs like credibility, trust, reputation, and I mean, if you build reputation, then perhaps that's your identity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. Actually,
I
it's
mean,
interesting that you say that.
I totally, this is complicated stuff. I mean, the only thing, and that's a bit tying to the third line, is like we should be really careful and mindful about the constructs we take to the blockchain because it has the potential to stay there, and that could be a risk we can't foresee. I mean, if you think about the Facebook people who couldn't imagine that if you make a like button that people get addicted to it because people are addicted to dopamine. No, that's it's totally true.
Response, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now go
true.
shame go shame yourself in the corner, please.
Okay, yeah. So now to come back to these specific words. So like, okay, we've kind of looked at identity, right? And sort of, questioning whether identity is somewhat in conflict with this idea of sovereignty, I suppose. Yeah, which is autonomy, right? So I'm assuming by I don't know, maybe I shouldn't make the assumption. Actually, okay, I'll ask you. What's your definition of sovereignty then, in this case?
Putting me on the spot here, right? What's the
Yeah.
definition of sovereignty?
Yeah, because for okay, whilst you sort of think, like my interpretation of sovereignty is not the coming back to this whole idea of domestication, right? It's not the right to do whatever the hell you
I know.
want,
Totally
right?
agree.
It's the ability to be autonomous, right, without coercion of a third party or second party, like anyone externally sort of coercing you to do something, right? It's different from active sort of like coercion and like market conditions, right? That's very like different. So to me, like at least my definition of sovereignty in that way is kind of closer to basically autonomy. My like autonomy as is defined by the lack of external coercion and internal ability to just like do stuff, right?
Yeah, it,
That freedom.
it ties into a foundation of ethics, and it needs an ethical foundation and human principles in the ecosystem you operate in, obviously. But I think sovereignty and identity are they bite each other.
Okay. In what way? Like, yeah, could you just like expand like what is the paradox that you see between
Perhaps we
sovereignty
should explain the
and
identity
identity?
part. For me, identity and digital identity are like these certificates that prove you are you, right? But identity has also the other meaning of person and self. And those should not be confused. Otherwise, it becomes a really
Okay, so basically external and internal definitions.
yeah, intrinsic,
Yeah.
intrinsic. Yeah.
Yeah. Intrinsic and extrinsic. Okay. So
When I talk about the sovereignty, is about me as a person acting uh, in an autonomous way.
yeah.
But if you tag identity from an external identity is pushed onto me, then that's not sovereignty, right?
Exactly, yeah, which is what I said earlier about sovereignty slash autonomy, relating to external coercion on life, basically. Um,
I mean, in the future, if you can prove, and it's all tied in with legislation, of course. But let's say after a year of proof on the blockchain, it has legal status. I don't know. I'm just calling out a number.
yeah.
Um, why do I still need identity? Because I can prove it is my home because I've been moving towards this place for 365 days back and forth. Yeah, too simple. But if you can tie in other attributes, and at some point it can be undisputable that's the case, or it's a social construct that other people come to your place, or they governed the fact that you're there. Is that an identity, or is it just proof? And that's why it's confusing and interesting and intriguing at the same time.
Yeah, okay, so like in this case, like this kind of comes back to some ideas that I've been thinking about, especially like with so recently, yesterday, I did a video looking into the Catalyst proposals, specifically to the ones looking into identity, and one of them was this dude who's basically doing, basically sort of tying identity to real estate, and from what you just said, like I pointed out that the nature of land is changing, right? So I can come along and I can, use my ADA or whatever on my BTC to pay for a piece of land. But, in the world that we're moving into, that particularly wouldn't be enough, say, right? Because you need to actually be arguably like using the land. So this comes back to, like if you're staying on it or if it's somehow being used productively, then that sort of adds on to, the external definition of it being identified to you being the owner and sort of steward of that piece of property. Does that make sense?
Yep.
As opposed to, yeah, so that's sort of just an interesting sort of dynamic, and that sort of relating to everything else. Yeah, go on.
Why I got triggered, perhaps that's an interesting story. Is I saw this Antilla Prism. I don't know if I pronounced it right. And I saw that demo that somebody kind of clicks some buttons and a certificate is pushed out, and then they import a spreadsheet, and the certificates are burned on the blockchain. I'm like, oh my god, that's a recipe for disaster. But in essence, that's how things are being done in this world. There are institutions who have like this stamp from the government who can give out these certificates, and there's someone working there who pushes the button and things happen.
Okay, yeah, okay, so yeah,
So that got me started with this whole thinking, like, oh my god, if we bring that same system to blockchain, that's troublesome.
yeah, so yeah, copying over basically issues. Okay, so it's interesting that you should mention the Atala Prism demo, because I feel the same way, and I've spoken to a few other people who are the same way. Because my preconception of what it was going to be, turned out to be very different, and in a way, like what we're collectively through proto our explorations of decentralized identity. I feel like Prism is just kind of saying, okay, what we're doing is taking the world of old and just kind of like creating this, as you said, certificate, which can be immediately just kind of stamped, and yes, this exists because this company says that this is true, without actually understanding, okay, the issue that I take with this, in a way, so far we've kind of, with these 3 points, we've been, going all
But
over
it's
the
all
place.
interconnected.
Exactly, it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, the thing here is, to me, if we just borrow over, stuff from the existing world, what we are doing is copying and pasting social games and all other sort of constructs from the old world, which do not particularly reflect reality, right?
No,
Because
they reflect
the tools which are
the time
available at the
frame
time.
in which those constructs exists.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
you lock something in eternity, while the social construct could be unfair, and it is. I mean, come on. And I think that's the fairness of things. If you can just push something on the blockchain as a certificate,
Yeah, it
the whole
really
the
undermines the
step in
problem.
those videos, like the accreditation,
Yeah.
I mean, that's like 3 years of research, I guess. I mean, but it was like one click of a button.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, but I suppose this brings us, yeah, back to the point of like there's a big difference between technical trust and time trust, right? Technical, yeah, those 3 years they spent it, they maybe figured out, how cryptographically to make it like
Oh, it's a
secure,
cool tech demo, but
right?
it's not a social construct we should use that way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. So we actually, we are finding common ground in this conversation. Okay, so okay, let's have a look. Social construct, you exist because you interact. Okay, so yeah, have you got any particular sort of thoughts which are particular to this second point? I know we've kind of been going up and down, but yeah, any thoughts regarding the nature of social constructs and
um,
the existence of
yeah, well, at, at the moment, if you look at the world, we have like two streams. We have like the potential surveillance state for everybody, and the civilian state. And that's for me, in combination with blockchain, Cardano, blockchain in general. I'm in the team. I'm in team. I call it Team Red.
Team Red. Okay.
If you take the blue pill, you end up in a surveillance state. If you take the red pill, you end up in other way around. If you take the blue pill, you end up in
Surveillance
surveillance,
state. Yeah.
and you take the red pill, you end up in a civilian state.
Yeah. In crypto
and, and
jail.
and that's also tied into this. So with social constructs, I mean, the things we have as reality today, that we think that our governments are in control. I think they signed over their control 10 years ago.
To who though?
So knowing that that's the case, should we copy identity structures which are not controlled by potentially our government?
Wait,
And
wait, just wait.
and you know, the social construct, if you take the macro view,
Uh-huh.
who is taking the lead for the future? I think that's the WHO and the WEF, World Economic Forum. Yeah, and then things become even more complicated. So and tying it back to micro, you exist. What does that mean if you're not in control? because the social construct is made elsewhere.
Wait, so when you say that governments have sort of relinquished the ID element, what exactly do you mean by that?
Could you rephrase that?
You said that the government, about 10 years ago, basically stopped being in control, right? Because you're talking about the macro. So you're talking about basically a handover of control to the corporation, or handover of control from, like, say for example, company.
I don't have the answers to that question.
Okay.
But yeah, well, corporate states probably have a bigger say than we are believing at the moment. But that's just assumption. That's so not so. But like the rules for pandemics changed around 2009, which gave the opportunity to call it out quicker. And then things become difficult. But it gave the WHO a lot of power.
Interesting. Yeah. So in a way, the conversation here is about, or at least in this particular segment, is power being concentrated, or is it being devolved, right? In the macro view, is power going to macro, or is it going to micro, basically, right?
I think it's going global.
Well, so it's going to a few who have control of many. Interesting. Okay, cool. So code is law. What constructs of the legacy world would we do well or do good in bringing over, and which ones should we not? Let's actually start there.
Do you have your sleeping bag with you? This is so difficult because, for one, we need to know what we envision. Let's say, let's make it black and white. We have this surveillance state / civilian state. Where do you want to go? I think, and that's also one of my pillars of conversational design is ethics. It's how does this fairer world look like? Where are we? Where do we want to be as a human species? I guess, and that's if you have a clear image of that future, which is also quite impossible to imagine. I guess perhaps we can give it a shot, but it's the liberalism, the word I can't pronounce it, but I'm Dutch. But that everybody wants to get the most for himself. I don't think that's sustainable.
Well, are you talking about libertarianism?
Yeah, it's about like getting the most for yourself in this capitalist society as a construct. It doesn't work. We just have too many people, and if everybody wants that, it's gonna fail. It's gonna collapse. So, talking about code of law, I think we should be more conscious about and mindful about thinking about the implications of our actions, especially like if you do like a Facebook with centralized servers, you kind of can burn the stuff and it's gone. But if you bring it into a decentralized network, it's going to stay, and then you can override it and upgrade it and how do they call it? Hard fork, combinate it, and but what I find important to communicate is that we need to be mindful of the constructs we bring onto the blockchain, because constructs change and evolve in real world. But if you bring them to blockchain, they kind of solidify.
Yeah. So,
And that
so
and I
yeah,
think
go on.
that's for one, I want to make software, so real social software, social technology. We need to create new social technology. We at the moment create applications which are built for the individual and that made our world an individual place. I think knowing that it can make the world an individualistic experience, you can also use technology to make it a social cohesive experience. And that's the journey I am on myself, is like, how can we design software that unites people? And that is something I would like to burn on the blockchain, because if we can come up with software that brings people together instead of polarizing and making them mad at each other, and even countries go to different and wrong places. That's not what I intended to build when I was like started this journey 22 years ago. And it's I find it a bit as a responsibility as well to try and bend digital design back to a pH neutral ground, or at least perhaps even a positive experience. And I don't know, what's your opinion about the mindfulness about the responsibility of code is law?
Yeah, it's I mean, also when I think of it, like I think of my mind immediately goes to governance, right? And especially within crypto, the most famous like application or reference to code is law is found in Ethereum, right? Where the fork happened, right, between Ethereum Classic and sort of Ethereum. And at the end of the day, an algorithm is an opinion, right? It's codified opinion, if you think about it, right? So that's actually not my thought. It's a line that I heard someone say once, and I was like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. So if you tie that back to like Google and Facebook, etc., whatever algorithm sort of feeds you, the stuff that you get from them, it's based on an opinion. So whenever I hear code is law, I come back to this idea of governance being super key, right? So it's not just hard forks, right?
Yeah, but
It's not it's not
that's
these.
reasoned from a just perspective. Let's say our policemen are being replaced by robots. The ruling is programmed by code is law. There is no human aspect anymore, and then the human nature is gone, and it becomes a black and white decision.
I beg to differ, because that is the case right now. A police officer basically follows the law, right? Yes, they're human and they're able to use their own judgment, but for the most part, they are not, well, at least in the UK, right? Let me actually, whatever that, right? In the UK, a policeman is not the judge, jury, and executioner,
No,
right?
okay, but let's
What
say
they
go
do.
up a little bit and go to the court, and the court is a robot. I mean,
Okay, no. In that case, no, here's the thing. I do not see a future where people are going to be like, okay, yes, entirely robot. Like, there's a reason why the Kleros project exists, right? Because the Kleros project basically it's this crypto project which at the moment is on Ethereum, but I think soon it's going to be moving over
I don't know.
to.
I don't know. I haven't heard of it, but
Oh, okay, yeah. It's basically sort of like bringing law onto the within
oh,
into
okay.
crypto, and fundamentally, what happens there is you can go you can have is conflict resolution, right, which is incentivized, And it's not a computer which is figuring out, like, whether the person is right or wrong. It's human beings who have said, okay, I'm an expert in this particular domain. And so, they have a look at, whatever the agreement was, and they have a look at what the end product was, and they come to a conclusion. I don't see, like, anytime soon people letting go of that, right? Because
No,
humans are fundamentally going to be at the core of that decision making.
the whole consensus governance stuff, that needs a real big push. We need to create new ways in it. I don't know if it's voting, or is it presence or energy or frequency or emotion. I have no idea. But the answer in the end probably will be very smart governance and consensus systems. And
But then ultimately, once I mean, it kind of comes back to the iRobot thing, right? Once there's, like in the March of the Nines, because like, for example, Elon Musk, talks about this, with what he's going through at Tesla, right? Where they've got with self-driving, autonomous self-driving, they've got to a point where it's really, really good, but there are those edge cases, right? Like, it's a March of the Nines. It's like 99.99999.
yeah, but isn't that already 10 times better than a human?
Yes, it is. But there's still, there's still that edge case, right? So I feel like even if once we get, to the point where the judge or whatever, like the court is an AI, we're still going to have those edge cases where people are going to, like, once the system arrives at the edge case, the person who's going to decide, is going to defer to a human, and it's going to say, hey, human, I've never come across this before. I need, a bunch of you to basically, arrive at a decision here and make precedents, right, on this particular edge case scenario.
Perhaps we get an AI license.
Maybe,
If
yeah.
if the risk is like 1,000 times smaller than human, it's okay.
Yeah, possibly. And then if
I
it
don't
gets
know.
it
I don't know.
wrong, if it gets it wrong, then it has a bank account which then gets fined or something. You know, yeah, because if you think about it, like, at the moment, there's been a really good point which has been made, which is AI already exists in the form of companies, right? And when a company, does something wrong, like, a whole bunch of people die from, the product that they made, worst case scenario is someone, goes to jail, or the most likely company gets fined, right? So in this case, it would just basically be the AI giving over, some of it, the money from its, digital wallet kind of thing, and maybe it being put out of commission. But even that, like, that kind of defeats the purpose, because it's basically the same machine, as many others. So putting it out of commission doesn't really make much sense, right? So, that would be the equivalent of putting someone in jail. You can do that with a person because a person is unique, right? That particular machine, given that it's networked, the problem that led to the death of this person is not limited to that machine itself, right? So anyway, this this has been a really weird.
But you can't have these discussions.
I know.
Obviously, you can streamline this, and you can try and box it and be more concise on topics. But I think these kinds of discussions need to happen first to create this sphere in which we can think. Because what for me is connected to Cody's law is like we need to learn to design with principles, and that's not happening at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And so I suppose, yeah.
And the workshops I've created is like ethical foundation. So you need to take a stance in where and how you want to act in the digital space. The boundaries, I call it the road. That's the road you lay down. Then you need, in my opinion, a definition of your product or assistant, and this is the vehicle, the car. Is it a luxurious car? Is it a little brick car? Is it a little skelter? And you need your design principles, which are the guiding boundaries, and your destination, which act as a magnet. You know, that's also a bit of a problem I have with the problem definitions, because I'm a creative, and design is my problem solving tool. If I create a problem and define it beforehand, you define a problem in analogy. You know, you create a construct you know or can fix, and therefore you fix that problem. But if you focus on that problem, there's probably a root cause for that problem, which is not going to be fixed. So are you creating a solution, or are you creating a band-aid? That's the kind of and if you create design principles, which are actually more or less a future vision, then you can and define your product as an entity, because I think that is also a finding I found very useful. Then you know how your entity acts in the digital world, and you know where he's going, that you know his principles, his morals, and the design principles create the direction you want to go, but keeps the opportunity to evolve your process with new insights. So that's
basically like it's fundamentally upgradable.
Yeah, and for it also fixes the quarterly problem, because if you, and that ties into way of working. But if you co-creation, you bring in like lead consumers, outliers, business analysts, designers, and some people from the board, and you start designing your ethical foundation, your assistant vision, and your design principles. Then you can call it stakeholder truth, because everybody who's involved and in the process is a better result than taking one perspective from the business by itself. And then you can say that those principles you created are actualized for a year, for example. And then you cross the quarterly boundaries, which often dictate project process and progress, because you decided that you will work on this for a year, for example. And those are things I saw in the space I'm working in, and I think I try to at least do the first iterations of solution, and perhaps even it could help. That I'm going to open source the Conversational UX Toolkit for teams to create experiences, to map experiences, to co-design experiences. The Conversational UI Toolkit is open source. Does not exist yet. So if there's any motion UI designer out there who wants to jump in, please do. And the workshops at the moment are my bread and butter. So that it's a bit difficult for me to give everything away. And I'm talking to James of Gimbal Labs to see how we can fit that into the future. And yeah, that all ties up with the 3.0 is perhaps we should, at least as Cardano community, come up with design principles where we want to go.
Yeah, 100%. Like, what's interesting, I suppose, in conclusion, actually, one of the things I was going to ask for us to conclude it, but in a weird way, you already did it, was
Sorry.
no, I mean it was just kind of weirdly spooky. So yeah, talking about code governance and how, you know, going back to what we spoke about in the beginning, like conflict resolution. And yeah, I feel like, you know, you've basically sort of, you know, answered that question and talking about this kind of upgradable nature. And in a way, what you've touched on as well there is the potential to have even more value creation within this kind of open source world, right? Because I can imagine, kind of in a way, in a similar way to how, for example, Tesla might be able to license out their self-driving full self-driving technology without having to actually like disclose um, like the secret source, right? So they can
Hmm.
be able to actually, have revenue come from it, but without having to like to disclose it. So I can imagine, say, yeah, a corporation having, internally, a decision-making model or whatever, and being able to have like an API to it where other companies, having, seen the success of that company can be like, oh, we would be interesting to tap into the decision making model internally of that company, but obviously they wouldn't want us to see it. So in a zero knowledge way, that could actually happen, right? So these other companies could, be making decisions, and in a zero knowledge way, the API can sort of answer yes or no, or it can sort of give some sort of influence in terms of their external decision making, again without giving away the secret source kind of thing. But anyway, dude, it's been super super awesome having this really weird conversation. And James,
Sorry.
no, dude, like that's the whole point of of all this, right? Is to actually have interesting and challenging conversations. And you mentioned James from Gimbal Labs. He's been watching. I don't know whether it's on and off or whether he's still watching. But yeah, so yeah, gimbalabs.com, I believe. And yeah, so I'll add the links to the video, or at least on YouTube, at least once this is going to be completed and online. Yeah, and I'll add links to your proposal as well, so people can have a
Awesome.
look at all that sort of awesome stuff on there. Cool. So I'm just gonna quickly do an outro. Doot, doot, doot. Cool. So thank you very much. Wait, hang on. Let me actually get this over to the side. Yeah, thank you very much for watching this. Those who actually turned up live. I hope you're entertained. Because I was entertained. By this. Hey guys, really appreciate this conversation. Yeah, James. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, James, for watching, and contributing in the chat as well. Yeah, so thanks for watching this whole thing. This weird conversation. Which has been super awesome. Weird is good. When I say weird, I mean it in that context. So yeah, thank you for watching. And yeah, so if you're within the crypto environment, not specific to Cardano, like, and you find these conversations, that can't be able to speak, you're finding these conversations interesting and want to sort of contribute, reach out to me. Yeah, just go over to cast.live. There you'll find the link to the Twitter. You can DM me, or the Discord. Join it. It's a small but mighty team who have sort of gathered there. And yeah, as I said, proto, the idea here is to sort of take first principles into sort of this emerging crypto structure that is happening, that enables, at least in a basic way, three things to happen, right? It's revolutionizing how we communicate, how we collaborate, and how we compensate, right? So these three fundamental things like really change the sort of the entire structure. So yeah, looking forward to having more of these conversations. And as we sort of actually get to build out some sort of version of a did, right, in a way that can be sort of publicly trusted, but also figure out this time element, right? And how how pruning, for example, this is one idea that we didn't actually sort of get to within the conversation, the idea of pruning the blockchain, right? Where in the same way the human brain works, right? Where whenever you think of something, you're thinking of the last time you thought of it, not when it actually occurred, right? And then the next time you'll think about it, you'll think of the last time, right? So memory kind of evolves in this beautiful and rich way that kind of prunes sort of past memory. So the blockchain, or the future of decentralized ledger technology, has to kind of evolve in this way, because otherwise it's unsustainable to just keep multiple like versions without kind of compressing it into into the distilling it into the essence, and sort of including it into the latest version, or at least the latest versions, right? Without having to keep the whole thing, right? So anyway, so thank you very much for watching, and yeah, I'll see you guys around. Doo, doo, doo.